being there for your mother and for a lot of other people. There's no reason for us to go on for long periods of time without having any contact with our loved ones. Now, Bonnie has a little problem with her mother, and Niles' aunt is her mother, and they both call her mother, but she can't understand what you're saying to her on the phone. So that becomes a little difficult. But Bonnie has started writing snail mail. And you know, the most old-fashioned way is still there, and her mother enjoys getting her letters and writing back. So, the ministry of, in one way or another, being there, of course it's best if you can manage to be there in person. The importance of it. The importance of being there for your family, but the importance of being there for your fellow Christians, your brothers and sisters in the Lord, the family of God, is very important too. I can't tell you how encouraging it is for me, your pastor, when you're present, when you're there. And it's encouraging to the other brothers and sisters in the Lord when you're there. I mean, even if you're not doing anything but sitting there. And hopefully you will at least get to the point where you do more than just sit there. But just sitting there, you're there. And that means something. And that's a blessing. So the ministry of just being there is an important ministry. You know, when somebody is sick, you just, in one way or another, being there. When somebody has passed away and their family is gathered and they're hurting, you just being there. People will say, well, I don't know what to say. You don't really have to say anything. Just being there, just putting your hand on their shoulder, give them a hug. Just the ministry of being there is an important ministry that we miss the importance of many times. Just being there. Here in John chapter 19, Jesus is on the cross. And in verses 25 to 27, now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother. His mother was there. And his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her to his own house, to his own home. Very interesting that even on the cross, when Jesus was dying, bearing the sins of all mankind through all the ages, which is far beyond our comprehension, but while he was going through all that in absolute agony and having been scourged and the whole thing, he was concerned about his mother. He was concerned about the well-being of his mother at that point. And it should give us pause as far as our concern for our mothers and our concern for them being taken care of. He obviously was not going to still be here on this earth, and he wasn't going to have the chance to take care of his mother personally, but he was making provision for her. And we know it's John here, even though he doesn't mention his name. Only in the Gospel of John do we hear about this disciple whom the Lord loved. And we have every reason to believe that he was talking about himself. You can understand why. I mean, if you were being inspired by God to write the gospel message, and you wouldn't want to say, yes, and I did this, and I did that, and it was me, and and you can understand how John came up with this. And besides that, I think John was very sensitive, and love is very important in his writings and faith. And I think he sensed the love of Jesus in a very powerful way, and he loved the Lord in return. Here in John chapter 13, verse 23, it says, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. So John is telling about when he, at the Last Supper, was next to Jesus. And then verse 2 of chapter 20, then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the disciple whom Jesus loved. So Mary is coming back to tell, Mary Magdalene is to tell the disciples that she's seen the tomb and she's seen the Lord. And again, it was John. In John 21:7, therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And this was after the resurrection when they had gone fishing. In John 21:20, then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following. And this is when Jesus was just about to go back to heaven. And John 21:24 brings it all together when John says, this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things. And we know that his testimony is true. So John is talking about himself. So here we have John standing there at the foot of the cross with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Jesus addressing them and putting Mary into the care of John, and John being now the son of Mary and Mary the mother of John. So the question that came to my mind is, why John? Jesus had 4 half-brothers that we know about: James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon. And we know in John chapter 7, it says that early on they didn't believe in Jesus, but later, we're told in Acts chapter 1, that the brothers were there in that group of about 120 who were praying in the upper room, waiting for the gift of the Holy Spirit to come. So the brothers didn't believe at first. You can understand somebody having a little trouble with believing that your brother is, Son of God. But then later on, after the resurrection, it seems, they did believe. And also in secular history, at least 3 of those brothers are said to have been martyred for the Lord. So things had changed. But still, he did not choose to put Mary under the care of any of his half-brothers or his sisters. And they were probably married with son-in-laws and so on for Mary. Chose this guy who wasn't a blood relative at all to say, she's your mother. Why? You know why I think? I think because John was always there. John was always there. And of course, Jesus knew that if in fact his brothers, at least 3 of them, were martyred, then maybe they wouldn't have been there for the rest of Mary's life. And we don't know about Joseph's, but also Jesus knew that John was not going to be martyred, which most of the apostles were, but he wasn't. And because he wasn't, because he ended up, of course, he went to the Isle of Patmos, and there's a legend that he was boiled in oil, but he wouldn't boil. Hey, when it's your time, it's your time. If it's not, you won't even boil. But John did not die a martyr's death. He died apparently of old age. So Jesus knew that he would be around to take care of Mary. The thing is, he would be there. He was there at the cross. He would be there for Mary. He knew that John would be there. The Bible tells us that family is very important. Your blood relatives, very important. But that the relationship in the family of God is even more important. Jesus said your earthly family may turn you into the authorities. Unfortunately, they may not follow me, and therefore you may be estranged from your family if you're going to follow me. He said, if you love father or mother more than me, you're not worthy of me. And if you love son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of me. So he was very straightforward about the fact. Now, the best thing is when your family member is also your family member in the Lord's family. That's the greatest situation that you can have. And I'm thankful for those family members that we have that are a part of God's family too. But look at John here. He was always there. John was there in Christ's inner circle. Remember at the Mount of Transfiguration, it was Peter, James, and John, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, went to the Mount of Transfiguration with him and saw him transfigured and all that. And later on in the Garden of Gethsemane, it was Peter, James, and John who Jesus had come further with him into the garden while the other apostles were back here. He had them come further to pray with him. They didn't do a very good job of it, but he was there in the inner circle. He was there in that group that was closest to Jesus. John was there next to Jesus in chapter 13 of John's Gospel. He was there at the Last Supper. He was even there leaning against Jesus. He was the one Peter addressed and said, ask him who it is that is going to betray him. Because John was there. John was near. John was close to Jesus. He was there. He was always there. John was there at the high priest's palace. Now, let me read you from John 18. We don't often think about this. We think of Peter having followed Jesus at a distance when they carted Jesus off and arrested him and took him to be tried and accused. We think of Peter going, but it says here in John 18, 15, and 16, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest. And he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. John, this other disciple, he was actually there when Jesus was taken into the palace of the high priest. And somehow he knew the high priest, and therefore he could get both of them in where all this was taking place. John, he seems to always have been there. John was there later at the tomb in John 20, verse 4. You remember when Peter went to the tomb and John outran him to the tomb. And John got there first, looked in, and then Peter got there and he went in. But still, there's John again. Seems to always be there. And now, in this passage, looking back to the foot of the cross, he was there. And Mary was there. And Jesus was there. John was there for Jesus and Mary was there for Jesus and John, and Jesus was there for Mary and John and everybody who's ever lived and ever sinned and needed his death on the cross to pay for their sin. What a beautiful picture of being there for each other. And when you think of your mother, I hope that you are blessed with being able to think of her being there for you. Think of your mother being there for you when you're sick, when you needed anything. She was there for you. Mm-hmm. If she wasn't, God bless you. I know that God will fill in that terrible gap. But if she was there for you, what a blessing. And what a thing to think about. What a thing to meditate on. Is that your mother was there for you. And if she's still alive and you still have the chance to be there for her, then be there for her. In whatever way she needs you to be there for her. And one of the main ways is just to tell her that you love her and that you appreciate her and that you thank her and that you're so grateful that she's still in the world with you and that you can still tell her that. And do little things for her and make her to know that you care. Exodus 20 verse 12 says, honor your father and your mother. And don't delay to do it. Because you know, one day she's going to be gone. As certainly as I'm standing here, your mother's going to be gone if she's not gone already. The day will come. If she's not gone yet, you need to take advantage of the opportunity you have. My mother died 30 years ago. 30 years I haven't had her. 30 Mother's Days have gone by without my mother. And people don't stay here. What is your life? It is a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. And so since we don't stay here, you know that either, and most likely since she's your mother and she's older than you are, she's probably going to be gone before you are. So take advantage of the opportunity to be there for her. My mom passed away of a sudden heart attack when I was 1,300 miles away, so I never got to say goodbye, never got to say anything to her. Didn't get to say anything to my father either. It's the same situation. I've really thought about her this Mother's Day for some reason. Mother's Day, May 12th, also was her birthday, May 12th. And Mom loved red roses. And I wish I could bring her a red rose this morning. I mean, that would be so neat to be able to bring her a red rose. God gave me a unique little thing that's, you probably think it's crazy, but if you could show that photograph, can you do that?
It's up, who's in the center? It's the last slide in the.
Roger doesn't know what to do. Don't feel bad, Roger. I wouldn't know what to do either.
Roger, just go, see the line of slides, go to the last one, it has a red rose bush. There's a red rose in it. Double click on it.
This is red rose in case you didn't know. But this is neat.
Carol will show you.
On our little property, we got lawn and then there's woods. You see my rose bush there? That's a volunteer rose bush. There used to be a greenhouse on this property, and every once in a while I'll find plants that aren't supposed to be there. And I've just been clearing out a little bit. And there's a red rose bush, and there is one red rose right in the middle of it. There's no buds, there's no other blooms, there's nothing except that one red rose. And it obviously made it think of my mother. And I wish I could give her one of those today. You don't know how much time you got. You don't know how much opportunity you've got. God's family is the eternal family. And John, even though he wasn't part of Mary's biological family, he became a son to her. You know, there are probably some young people that you know who don't have a mother and who need a mother. And perhaps you don't have a child, or your children are grown up and gone, and you got some mothering you'd like to do. And so there's always need, like John for Mary and Mary for John, to be a son, to be a daughter, to be a mother. Parenting our daughter Annie was at times like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. Have you ever tried to do that? As you can imagine, it wouldn't work too well. Sometimes it didn't work too well. But I'll tell you something about Annie. When you need Annie, Annie will be there. When you need her, she'll be there. When Bonnie had a sudden stroke 1,300 miles away from Annie, we needed help. Bonnie couldn't walk a step. With a walker, if I had one of those belts and was holding on to her, that's the only way she could go anywhere. And here comes Annie. Here comes Annie. And it was snow on the ground, pushing a wheelchair through a snowbank to get it to the doctor's office with Bonnie in it. It hadn't been for Annie and her taking on what she considered to be a Yankee accent in order to talk to doctors and nurses, because she thought talking Southern they wouldn't pay attention to her. She said, "This is Annie Johnson," and she tried to talk through her nose. Anyway, Annie was there. And then when her great-grandmother, Mama Flora, over in Reform, Alabama, was not getting the proper care in the nursing home, and there are other nurses in the family that live over there, but here comes Annie. And Annie was over there, and she got them to reverse a procedure and let 99-year-old great-grandmother drink a cup of coffee. And when Bonnie's father died, I drug them all up to New York. Then I came back to Mississippi. But when he was dying of Parkinson's disease up there, 1,300 miles away again, who comes but Annie? And she's up there, and her grandmother can't hear her. And so Annie writes a big note, "Put on your hearing aid, or I'm not going to talk to you." That's Annie. Honor your father and your mother. Be there. Any way you can be there, but be there. Someday you're going to regret those opportunities that you let slide by. Because you were busy, and it's true. Would you bow your heads with me? Excuse me, Mike.